Find a seat if you can, or a wall if you can. I feel like we're missing a few tables in here. I don't know why. I don't know anything. I just work here. Yeah. Oh, Lord, open my lips. And now shall be afraid. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen. Alleluia, alleluia. Give glory to God, our light and our life. Oh, come, let us worship Him. All right, friends. Could I get somebody to hit, Catherine, would you hit the light for me for a second? Yep. There we go. Just a moment about this weird dude. And this weird dude is not Jesus. It's not Jesus. It's not God either. You guys are really good at guessing. That is John the Baptist. Yep. Yep. If you can find a really strange character in art, there's a good chance it's John the Baptist. The way that you can tell, here's your little bit of iconography history lesson for the moment. One of the ways you can tell this isn't Jesus is that in this, which is called a nimbus, sometimes we call him a halo. If it's an icon of Jesus, it's going to have lines, 3 lines coming out of the sides. Anyway, I'll try to find another one for you to show you. But John the Baptist, who wore camel's hair and locusts, and ate locusts and wild honey, which is a very strange diet, no question about it. John the Baptist had one job, and his one job was to get people ready for the coming of Jesus. And so he would tell people to repent and to look for Jesus. So probably John's most famous line or saying is, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." And John was a very strange person. What was John's relation to Jesus? Anybody remember? Was he related to Jesus? Cousin. It was Jesus' cousin. Yeah. So here we have John the Baptist, or John the Baptizer, and his message was one of repentance and preparation. That is, to get ready for the coming of Jesus, to get ready our hearts for the coming of Jesus. Yes, Lucy? Up here? Yeah, that is very obscure Greek, and it says, the top looks like holy. It's probably the Holy John, but I really can't even make out what that is. It's a very strange expression. But I'm sure that it says the Holy Baptizer, maybe, something. That's what it is. Yeah. All right. Let us pray. Lord Jesus Christ, we implore you to hear our prayers and to lighten the darkness of our hearts by your gracious visitation. For you live and reign with the Father and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Let us bless the Lord. and preserve you.
Amen.
Thank you, Bruce. Just a couple pictures about the second floor. Can I get someone to hit the lights real quick? I'm going to try to take pictures of these as I'm able. This is the 2 classrooms. You know, as you walk, if you're thinking of walking in there and you go up the stairs, on this side is going to be the education room where we will have Bible class eventually. And then on the right side, there's a smaller multi-purpose room with a kitchenette, and then there are 2 classrooms that will be I think the kindergarten and the transitional kindergarten classes. That's what these 2 rooms are. So they're kind of one right next to another, and then they have a divider in between them so that they can be kind of joined together along the way. So this is the right classroom to get a sense of what the rooms are looking at. So it's fun. Things are happening. I like it when things are happening. That's good. Anybody have any questions on that stuff? They're very persnickety about not letting people up there. Something about, you know, getting injured and insurance, et cetera. But I will exercise my pastoral prerogative and try to sneak up there every so often and take pictures, so that we can have some idea of what's going on. Thursday, because it seemed like a good idea, we're going to have table talk at Out of Bounds Brewery Thursday night at 7. So this is our 3rd Thursday. I'm almost certain they have some sort of Christmas lager or something like that. I'm sure that it'll be great. But that will be at 7 o'clock at Out of Bounds Brewery, which is about 200 yards that way. And it's always fun. And I have no idea what we will be talking about yet. But I am sure that we will be talking. And it will be about something. And it will be on Thursday. Wednesday, noon service, as I mentioned. This is our Christmas schedule, and I want to highlight this for you for a moment because next Sunday is Christmas Eve, which means that it is both a Sunday and Christmas Eve, which means that it is all church all the time. So after some debate and conversation, we decided rather than doing, combining and doing one service or something like that in the morning, we decided to just leave the morning schedule as usual. So next Sunday morning, 8 and 10:30 as usual. We've got Sunday school and Bible class in between. The Sunday school will be doing their, they will be doing rehearsal for the children's Sunday school service, which is at 6 p.m. Christmas Eve. And then the candlelight divine service is at 10 p.m. Now for the Lutheran trivia question. Maybe I mentioned this last week, I'm not sure. What does it mean if I call it a divine service? Communion service means Jesus is there in word and meal. Typically, so if you see divine service, that means it's a communion service. If it doesn't say those words, that means that it's a prayer service, that it's some kind of a prayer service. So the 6 o'clock service is not a communion service. It will basically be a spoken vesper service, which will include the Sunday school program, which is largely centered around From Heaven Above. We're kind of rounding out our Luther year with doing From Heaven Above for the children's program, which is fun. I like that. They don't, but that is entirely because I just forgot. So, good catch, Larry. But it being Sunday morning, of course it's going to be divine service. So we get lots of Jesus next weekend, and that can't be bad. Pastor Meyer.
You're missing the 6:30 p.m. service tonight at St. Augustine of Canterbury Episcopal Church.
Thank you. That's Winds of Faith.
Christmas concert. The first half of the concert is The Story.
The Story.
Based on a love-and-tell story. And it's story of Christmas, complete with the director giving us a sermon.
All right. So we started off tonight at 6:30. And where is it? St. Augustine's is over.
It's on Wildcat.
It's on Wildcat, so not too far from
Whitney High.
Whitney High School. Yeah. I've never been in the sanctuary there. Is it a nice sanctuary?
It's a nice sanctuary.
Is it?
They do violence, though, being a Churchville church.
Yeah.
They tear out pulpit, altar, communion rail, and put the winds and they in the church.
Right there. Crazy pants. All right.
Great Christmas.
Yes. And then Christmas Day, the service, divine service, is at 10:30. Does anybody have any questions on what's happening next weekend? So special points will be allotted based on how many of the services you can make it to.
What's the prize?
It's a surprise.
Jesus.
It's a surprise. It's Christmas because it's a surprise. I'm not telling you. Yes, Walt?
Did you draw that?
I did not. I wish I could. It's kind of cool, isn't it? I know. I mean, I love art where the more you look at it, the more stuff you find, and it just kind of makes you think, huh, I wonder what else is there that I haven't found. Can you see the dove in the piece there? Yeah, this is just one of those pieces. I found it on the internet, and I really like it. So there it is. I know from the center of it. That's actually why C.S. Lewis gave us the line, "The Witch in the Wardrobe." He said, "Since it is so likely that children will meet cruel enemies, let them at least have heard of brave knights and heroic courage. Otherwise, you are making their destiny not brighter, but darker." And he has, and this is a concept which I think is a huge one in literature, and that is that the notion, if I can use this expression, that good literature has conflict. That's what it means to have a plot. It means that there's conflict in it. There's something wrong that needs fixing, and the better the conflict is portrayed, the more vividly, the more dramatic, etc., the better the resolution is likely to be brought about. Oftentimes, what it feels like happens in today's literature, and I would include movies with that, is that we spend much more time reveling in describing the darkness, and we forget that the point isn't that there is darkness, but that the darkness is overcome by the light, basically. And you can see that in a lot of different ways and places, and that's basically his point in this article, is that we need to think about ways in our culture, in music, in art, in writing, in literature, in movies, etc., of looking and recognizing and finding places that do kind of get this basic good versus evil concept, but that actually portray good as happened, and that good does overcome evil, and it does so by sacrifice. And that's really his point here. It's a great article. I hope you read it, and if you are of the sort that looks for things on the internet that actually feed you and don't just make you mad, he's one of the people that I always appreciate reading, because he makes you think along the way. One last thing before we get back to Matthew then. Like the rest of the world, or much of the rest of the world, I saw Star Wars yesterday with my kids. And I'm going to write an article about it for that online journal that I write for every so often called The Federalist. Molly recently asked me to write an article about it. But I wanted to just say one thing, and that is that never mind all of the Star Wars jerkery, etc., which I can kind of do with the best of them, I think. What was really great about this movie was the concept of love equals sacrifice. I mean, just at a very very simple level. To love means to be vulnerable, means to be willing to fail, and it means to sacrifice. And it is that very core concept that ties what I'll call mythology to the true story of the cross. And that all mythology, even though it messes up the true story of the cross in many and various ways, all true mythology, and that's really what comic books are, is mythology. All true mythology gets this notion of sacrifice at the heart of it. And there was one line in the movie, and I can say this without making it a plot spoiler. I don't know if I can put it exactly. Maybe someone who's seen it can help me. But it was something along the lines of love means saving those you love, not fighting those you hate. Something like that. I know I'm close on that. And it was just, you know, it's a nerdy movie. I'm sorry. It's what you get when you get a pastor at 47. But it was just an interesting concept too. That what happens very often, and I very much feel this in our culture, is that we get so wrapped up in what we are opposed to, that is what we hate, that we forget that kind of the point is not what we hate, but what we love. And what are we willing to do that is sacrifice for those who we love? And that doesn't matter if you're talking about spending a Saturday morning bringing your kids to a Sunday school program instead of going and doing something you wanted, or something much more grandiose. Love means actually giving something up for the sake of the other. And that's just a really, really profound concept. And I'm glad to see that even in weird, dirty places in our world, that you can still get that, even if it's just a little bit. So there's your sermon. I promised myself I would not talk about Star Wars in the sermon, because I'm not going to be that pastor. I'm not. But it was hard. So there you have it. Does anybody else have any questions or comments or anything else that I have forgotten before we get back to Matthew? There you go. All right, Barbara.
I'm probably going to be in bad trouble for saying this, but there's something else very important happening on Christmas Day. Jeff and Ann are getting married. And you don't feel bad if you're not invited. There'll be 4 people.
That's right. It will be an intimate get together, and we will conclude them in our prayers. There you go. Well, there'll be 5, because Jesus will be there. And on that pious note, let's go back to Matthew. We had what I thought was a really interesting discussion about the children and all of this last week, and we got through a whole 6 verses. So we're gonna shoot high and see if we can get through 3 this morning. Woe to the world for temptations to sin. For it is necessary that temptations come, but woe to the one by whom the temptation comes. And if your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life crippled or lame than with 2 hands or 2 feet to be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than with 2 eyes to be thrown into the hell of fire. Now there is one word that is, first of all, absolutely necessary to get into your head to start to understand this passage. Okay? Hyperbole. That means intentionally exaggerating something for the point. Okay? If ever there was an example in the scriptures of hyperbole, this is it. All right? Now, having said that, we can start to get at this, and we do have to get at the underlying question: what is it that causes you to sin? Because that is actually the point under the point here. What is it that causes you to sin? It's your heart. It's not your hand or your foot or your eye. It's your heart. Because out of the heart flows all kinds of evil and wickedness. Unbelief comes from the heart. Now, having said that, so you could almost start this by saying, tear out your heart and throw it away. Because your heart, left to its own devices, is what will steer you wrong. If all I'm doing is basing my whether I sin or not, what I do on how I feel, that is certainly a horrible barometer of what I should do or not do. Okay? Now, a couple other things. Clearly also, however, external things can have an impact on temptation and can serve as a stumbling block to sin, right? It doesn't take a great deal of theological sophistication to say if you are tempted by certain things, the more you are around those certain things, the more tempted you're going to become, that there is at least at a very basic level a fairly good solution for that, right? What? Step away. Don't go around those things. Right? That it just at a very simple basic level, and let's kind of understand what's going on here. As human beings, we are all tempted to sin. We all sin, and we all struggle with many and various different kinds of sin. And a part of living as a Christian means learning to recognize your own weaknesses. Learning to recognize what is it that is going to actually cause you to sin. And how do I seek to avoid putting myself in that situation? I don't think that's too complicated. But that is at kind of a basic level, at least part of what's going on here, is if there are things that cause you to stumble and fall, and you know that what these things are, then seek to avoid them. Duh. That's not real complicated. I'm not saying it's easy. Don't get me wrong. It's not easy at all. But to first of all recognize what is it that tempts you outside of your own heart. What are the things that can serve as stumbling blocks for you? Recognize these things in yourself and in temptation, so that kind of gives you a focus for prayer. Okay? Is everybody with me on that? All right. And that sometimes may mean not doing something that you want to do. Because if you want to do something that is going to cause you to sin, or is going to cause someone else to sin, you shouldn't be doing it. Barbara.
So why is it necessary that temptations come?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I was wondering if one of you would pick up on that.
See, one thing to say it's inevitable, or why would it be necessary?
Why is it necessary for temptations to come? Well, let's kind of make sure that we understand what is a temptation, right? A temptation is something that may or may not be good or evil in its own right, but that causes us to stumble. And I don't want to go too far down the crazy rabbit trail of free will, but just to kind of peek our head into that a little bit. A part of what we see in creation, in the garden, is that God creates Adam and Eve in his image with the capacity to love, with the capacity to sacrifice and to give of themselves for one another. He also gives them the capacity to not love. That is a part of what that's a part of what it means to love, is that it is not forced. If I compel my children to give each other gifts, are they gifts? Now, maybe you can say, I am teaching them a good habit, and that's probably true, I hope. But if it is compelled, then it is not a gift. Love means that it is something that is freely given and not compelled. So I would argue that temptation is necessary in the sense that love is something that must be freely given and not compelled. I knew you would have a question.
I'm trying.
Mary. You have been so good. I appreciate it.
I didn't say, well, I complimented you. I thought for a while you were going to bring up our vice president on this avoiding.
I'm not going there.
Try to avoid that one too.
Okay, so even going back to earlier about love and what have you, if you're always giving the love, you're always making the sacrifice. Is being a school teacher, obviously, I'm going to come back with, I've seen pretty close now to 2 generations that feel that they are absolutely entitled. Everybody's making a sacrifice to show them love,
Yep.
but they're not making any sacrifices.
Right?
And how do you teach that? Well, that's somewhere along the line.
I think you were going to ask me a hard question.
Okay, go for it.
I obviously completely agree. That is one of the great challenges of our day is, and I really don't want to feel like I'm playing the same song here all the time, but what we're talking about is how do you teach people how to be human beings, which means receiving things from others and giving of yourself. It means both. And very often what it appears happens, or what we seem to be struggling with in our culture, is how to teach that as a cycle and not simply as an entitlement. That we've kind of somehow or another gotten into a mentality where what we're actually passing on to our children is that they deserve X, Y, and Z. That what it means to be human is that people give you stuff, and that other people take care of you, and that's it, and not the notion that I receive all good things from God, and that God in turn uses me to serve my neighbor. I agree 100%. That is the challenge. A part of it, I think, comes down to as you know, teachers in a school, you're of course only seeing one part of the picture, right?
Right.
You're seeing children. You're not seeing parents. And you're probably not given much opportunity to teach the parents, if any. And maybe just the opposite, that the parents treat you as a teacher closer to an employee and not a partner.
Right.
Something along those lines. And you know, you teachers back me up on this. But and I definitely don't have any answers on how we do it in every context. Okay, I don't know how to fix that, Larry. That's for sure. What I think we can do, however, is say, how do we here at Holy Cross, and we, you know, the Peperkorn family and the Hopper family and all of the various families, how do we teach that to our own children? Now, part of it means being quite explicit about that. I know that for myself, I have to get really, really obvious on what's going on with my own children, and saying, this is what's happening. I'm giving you an allowance, and I am teaching you to give a part of that allowance to the church. Now, I could just give it directly to the church and sort of cut out the middleman here, but I want you to learn, oh children, that that everything that you receive from others, and that you in turn pass it on. And we need to be that explicit in the process. I kind of feel like we've, in a desire to not offend, we've brought subtlety to almost meaninglessness. Does that make sense? Now, I know that there were a few hands here, and since Pastor Fro's been gone for a few months, I'll give him priority of pulpit here. Pastor Fro, welcome home.
Thank you. I just wanted to say this. I think the source of love is the key, and when any entity other than God is seen as the giver, for example, if we were to put the government there, in the early church, compassion and mercy flowed out of the church, and it was a result of the love that the bride of Christ had received from Christ. Then, throughout the history of, for example, even America, most of our compassionate institutions originated from the church.
Right. Catholic hospitals, Lutheran hospitals,
Yeah.
right, orphanages, you know.
And then
there
came a time when the government got involved to make things more fair. And as soon as you use that kind of language, you're talking law, and therefore it no longer flows from love. And so I don't have the answer to the questions that Larry is raising, but I think that it's much more complicated as a nation, or to look at it in a public realm, than it is to look at it in this realm.
Right.
We can look at it here and there. Law and gospel serve two unique functions. And we are not motivating people through the law. Like you said,
Right.
You could tell your children, you must,
Right.
by your sibling present. But if it's a must, then it's a law issue and not an agape issue.
And I might even do that for to a certain degree. I don't know. That's and you're right. You probably realize we're not going to fix this from the government point of view. Or Bible class. I'm sorry. It's kind of a disappointment. But
The swamp does not like to be
the
drained.
swamp does not like to be drained. What you're going to find underneath one swamp is another swamp. Or a whole different swamp, maybe. So again, my question is not simply how do we, because honestly, I'm not that interested in critiquing at a large scale the problem, but at kind of getting at how do we positively make a change right here, right now for us? Because that I think that's what we can't do alone. Now there are a few other hands. Richard.
On a different topic, going back to the word temptation, and not asking for any dissertation right now, but I've read recently where there's been some discussion about in the Lord's Prayer changing the word temptation, and it has to do with perhaps the interpretation. Can you just make a mental note of that? And
Sure.
maybe talk about it at another
Yeah,
time?
yeah. And I will, I spoke on it very briefly last week in Bible class, but I will make a note of it again, and maybe next week. There's another article that that I meant to print out for you guys this morning that I forgot by an English professor named Tony Esselin. He wrote a really outstanding little article on the whole Lord's Prayer thing. You guys remember what that's about? That just as a side comment, Pope Francis mentioned that he didn't like lead us not to temptation, but he thought that it should be reworded. And Tony Esselin is the name of the author. Really had a nice little response to that I thought was helpful. I'll try to make a note of that for you, Richard. Thank you. Dennis.
Can we move on to this part about the one by whom the temptation comes? And
Sure.
Can you comment about willful temptation and just temptation that's
Right. Well, and when we talk about temptations, and remember, again, context. This is about the receiving the child in my name, and the one who causes the little one to sin. That's that word scandalon. Scandalize the child. That would be better with the millstone. That's the context for that. We have. I think that you could say that there are kind of a couple levels, layers at which we talk about temptation. Ultimately, temptation comes from Satan, right? And that Satan would use us, people, as instruments for his evil purposes. Okay? So this well, first of all, is directed against Satan, go to the one to whom temptations come. And secondly, this serves as a warning or judgment for us if we become a tool of the evil one to cause others to sin, to stumble. I mean, that's kind of the two levels that I would talk about that. And again, what is really the overarching kind of point behind this whole thing is to recognize that these temptations are going to come, and that you, O Christian, will need to recognize temptation as it comes and to make sacrifices in order to avoid temptations. I mean, that's a part of the challenge of sin, I think. And this time of year is a really interesting time because it is so challenging for so many people. I think that most counselors, therapists, and pastors would tell you that like 80% of the time and energy that they spend in kind of crisis counseling happen in December, January. You know, but this is not the most wonderful time of the year for many people. You know, the carol or whatever you want to call it notwithstanding, that this is a really, really hard time of year for a lot of people. You have lots of added stress. You've got kind of compressed time, compressed schedules. You're eating lousy. You're drinking more. There's just every scenario that says you are just waiting for something to kind of push you over the edge, and it's probably going to happen. And so to kind of first of all recognize that is the case, and that is possible, and that all of us are in a heightened state of stress and worry, I think is a huge help to begin with. And that also means that in a desire to be festive or whatever, what may be innocent to one person may be very dark to another person. And so we kind of have to remember to love each other and to not and to show an extra amount of charity toward one another in this time of year, because everybody's kind of stress level is that much higher. Rosalind and then Walt.
So the way I've always heard this explained is basically woe to the Christian who is able to exercise their freedom, say, in having beer or wine, because you might be stumbling someone who can't, and so you should always be thinking of your other brother in everything you do. Is that a completely wrong interpretation?
That's a great question, Rosalind, and we actually talked about this in our doulos Bible class Thursday morning. We were doing Romans 14 in our men's classes this week, where Romans 14 is the chapter that talks about stumbling blocks in the house who love the weaker brother. And kind of the basic point of that, to sort of sum up, is don't use your freedom as a Christian as an opportunity to kind of rub your nose in it to somebody else. I mean, that's really at a very, you can almost summarize this as saying, don't be a jerk. Which, don't be a jerk. Be a Christian. Don't do something that is going to cause somebody else harm. That is reasonable, right? Love is about looking to the well-being of the other, and not and being less concerned about my own rights and more concerned about my neighbor's needs. That's kind of where I would approach that with. I mean, our conversation in our Thursday in our doulos Bible class kind of centered around looking at what are the things that may cause someone to sin. Okay? Well, alcohol will cause some people to sin. I'm here to tell you. Stop me if you've heard this before. Stole this. Right?
And just that.
Yep, just this. This will cause someone to sin. This, on the other hand, that all of us stumble in many and various ways, in lots of ways and lots of times. And a part of what we as a community always have to be thinking is, what is reasonable for the whole, so that we are not causing undue or unnecessary or unhelpful stress on others. And that doesn't matter if you're talking about sugar or alcohol or kids making noise in church, which is another part of what we talked about on Thursday, or people singing at the communion rail, or you pick it. There's always something. And kind of how do we as a community sort of balance the love for the whole and looking out for the well-being of others with the rest. And that means forcing us to get outside of ourselves and get outside of our own wants and needs and offenses, and such, and think about other people first, which is hard because I like thinking about myself. And I know what I need better than what anybody else needs. That's for sure, right, Larry?
I was just, and I'm reminded frequently before communion, my grandfather, before every meal when we prayed, he had a line in his prayer every time he lit up. Be ever mindful of the needs of others.
Yeah, that's a nice line. I like that. Yeah, that's good counsel. Dr. Fro.
Your discussion about alcoholism triggered something because in Kenya I serve a church body that is very concerned about pastors drinking, and not only because it is viewed in the rural areas as a terrible sin, but the other side is when the history of the church is whenever there's a theological problem, we fix it with a worse theological problem. And,
every heresy is an overreaction to something else.
So my concern here is, and I think I want to follow up on your statement, because we cannot allow people to put, and Paul says that too in Romans 14, we cannot allow people to burden us again with yokes that Christ has freed us from. So the question is, in this situation, it comes down to love. And love sometimes manifests itself with a firm tap on the bottom side.
Yes.
And I think what I'm trying to express here is that while I would never willingly. If somebody came into my house and I knew they were a recovering alcoholic, and they felt that perhaps this would be problematic to even smell alcohol, I would never think of serving alcoholic drinks while they're there.
Right.
On the other hand, and this actually happened one time, someone who was a recovering alcoholic came into my home and went on for about 15 minutes about how evil and sinful it was for anyone to drink an alcoholic beverage.
Right.
At which point, my wife and I were sitting there. I stood up, walked into the kitchen.
I know what you did.
I didn't think you remembered. I actually had a drink of wine, a glass of wine.
As a confession of faith, essentially.
In the presence of this gentleman, and he was upset at me for 3.5 or 4 weeks. But he finally figured out what I was doing.
Yeah. Well, and it's an interesting challenge, and love, honestly, love is messy. It just is.
It sure is, because you don't know which way the pendulum is moving.
Right. And a part of that means simply being very conscious and aware of our own weaknesses and failings, and of our own kind of what are the things that and I hesitate to use this word, but I'm going to use it anyways, that would trigger me. What are the things that might cause me to sin? And I have to have a real firm grasp of myself before I can kind of look in love toward my neighbor and try to think through how I might help them. I see a few other hands. Walt and then Dennis.
Well, back on temptations, I feel like, we're in a fallen world and we're swimming in a world of temptation.
Right. That's right.
And then it's very important for things like a Holy Cross of prayer that at least, for 5 minutes a day, I'm focusing on something else.
Right.
Because, it's like that Lutheran thing, I'm daily reborn.
Right.
You gotta look into that because we're out there swimming in that world of temptation. And I can do my prayers in the morning and then go out, somebody cuts me off on the freeway.
That's the end of that.
Yeah. And so it's just what.
Or you cut somebody off. Right. Well, and a part of that, and again, this is another word that I hesitate to use because it means other things as well, but we're really kind of talking about mindfulness, essentially. Being mindful of our own weaknesses, of our own needs, of our own challenges. And that mindfulness leads us to look in, first and most importantly, in charity toward our neighbor. That recognizing my own weakness means looking in love to the weaknesses of my neighbor as well. Dennis.
I'm reminded of Christ said that the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. But the question is, what's that freedom for?
Right.
Is it for me to indulge myself?
Right.
Or is it freedom to take care of others?
Right. Right. You got it. I'm going to move on. Just for fun. See that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I tell you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. So what do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it is not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. All right. So there are a couple kind of key words in here that I think are worth our looking at. First is that word despise. We learned that word a couple times in the Catechism, right? We should fear and love God so that we do not despise or anger our parents and other authorities, but honor them, serve and obey them, love and cherish them. And how easy it is to to despise, that is, to look down upon as if they are of no worth. And what you get here in Matthew and throughout Matthew is this concept that it is precisely the one that is the most in need that God values the most. Let me say that again. Say it in a slightly different way. God values the most the one who needs the most. And in this case, in this example, that is these little ones. Okay? And then we get, boy, howdy, has a lot been done on that. I tell you that in heaven, their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. This is, if there was a proof passage or something to that effect for guardian angels, this is probably it, or one of them. You know, this concept that these little ones have their own angels. I mean, that's just kind of grammatically what's going on, is that that's a possessive. And that's sort of the picture, again, of God as the guardian, as the protector of the ones that are marginalized, that are in need, more than anything or anyone else. Okay? So this is one of the verses, if not the verse, where you're going to find the concept of a guardian angel, that God sends his angels to guard and watch over us, his children. Which is a great picture for us to have, especially in Christmas tide, because this is almost angel's tide. We're always talking about angels during December, and I really like the notion that these angels are there to bring the needs of these little ones into the presence of God. That's really the picture, which I think is kind of cool concept. I used your cookies as a couple of examples in Bible class, but I promised I didn't eat any of them. Ben?
Does seeing the face imply like a special rank?
That's an interesting question. Their angels always see the face of my Father. I think that the point there is one of access. Absolutely. That they are in the presence of God, therefore these little ones are in the presence of God. That's the comparison there, yeah. All right, friends. I think we've got enough of these little ones surrounding us now that we're about done. Larry, you got a last question or comment?
It seems like almost when you go through all of them, the angels are sitting on it. A lot of this is about what value you put on it and what you discount.
Yes.
I mean, I'm thinking of, the Islamic faith where they start off with prayer by facing each angel that is with them.
Right.
It's not that I think anything is bad, but there is a question in my mind about if we're valuing this verse more than another verse. It seems like there's a lot of way to go on.
Well, and that is, of course true. And probably the hardest thing for us about angels is that angels are so easily romanticized into all sorts of absolutely, I think the theological term is wackadoodle. All sorts of wackadoodle ways. Have I ever done a Bible class on angels here? No. Have I? I've got a Bible class on angels. I should do that sometime, because there's a lot that could be said and thought about here.
Maybe a short one.
Did I do a short one maybe? 3 Sundays? Yeah, we can do better than that. I'm quite confident we have more than 3 Sundays worth of stuff on angels. All right, friends. We're going to stop there and close with the benediction. Don't forget about the cookie sale in the other room. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Amen. Amen. Also, don't forget, parents, this is the note about Sunday school right here.